Call April 9th, call meeting for the Airport Commission to order. Roll call.
Neil Johnson,
Here.
Greg Collier,
Here.
Andrew Barker,
Audio. There he is. Now he's ready.
Andrew Barker,
Here.
Joel Gardner,
Here.
Steve Smith,
Here.
Bill Schoonover,
Here.
Micah Thomason,
Here. No minutes?
No.
This
Hey,
month?
Rose, some of them are muted. They do have the option to unmute themselves. I already did, but they keep muting back. So if you guys can listen, you guys can control that, or I can unmute them.
I'd unmute him.
so the guys are muting themselves? Okay,
So I keep unmuting them, but they hit mute back. So I'm not sure if they want to be. There you go. I think
Okay.
they got it. They got the message.
awesome.
I kept muting so it doesn't go to my picture since when I make noise in the room, so I'm watching.
You just don't want us to see your smiling face.
Oh, I'll be happy to.
You can go.
Any comments from the audience at this time? If not, I'm going to use this time to move a portion of number 6 to Ernest so he can get on out of here. I'll have to stay for the length of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, there's been quite a few changes over the last month or so with how things are currently being operated both at City Hall and the other city facilities. Since the last time I was here in February, we did, I believe, get possession back of Hangar 306 from Mr. Dowell, and I think that's already been rented out to another individual. I received this morning the current delinquent hangar rental report. There are basically 3, there's more than 3, but it's basically 3 individuals, and one of which was on the agenda for today, but I believe that's been moved to May. I was hoping that possibly he would be here, but so I would request that we put these off until May, also the other 2, until we can kind of get an idea of what's going to be going on with the current situation. And I appreciate you moving me up.
Anybody, any comments on that from the commission? I believe in the situation we're in all over of course, the city and the country, that's not too much. I think it's a good move to go ahead and do it. Is there any objections to what Ernest is asking for? If not, we'll just go ahead with it, okay?
Thank you.
Good. The update from Summit Aviation. We're going to be talking a lot about that. It's probably going to today. Did everyone get a chance to get the email on the latest request from Summit? Did anyone not see it? So what's before us today is either forgiving 2 months of the rents, which is, was it 40, what was $4,700? $4,700 total.
Nope, per month, right?
Right,
That's per month,
right.
per month.
For total per month, that's where I was going with it. $4,700 total, that meant the accumulation of the hangars and the FBO for 2 months, each month. There was another request. We had talked about moving it forward, and they're requesting if we move it forward, they're asking for 3 months of continuation rather than the 2 months. Just get, before we ask Dave to comment, I would like to get the commission's comments on those, if you have any.
All muted.
Anybody? They're all muted?
No, we're still here.
I'll go ahead and let Dave then make that presentation, and then we'll discuss it and see what kind of
With Mark
motion we
in
have.
the room, I'll let Mark make the presentation in front of you there, please.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm just going to be real brief. It's simple what we're asking for. We're a 2-month deferment. The numbers spell out it is what it is. I mean, just in a percentage-wise, I mean, it's staggering. Our sales now weekly are 7% of what they normally were. That's 93% loss. Okay, the reason we're requesting the deferment is both that income is never going to come back. I mean, it isn't going to be made up. Number two, I believe there is been some specific guidance from the FAA recommending rent, I believe they call it abatement, for both for 135, 121 operators, 145 operations, and FBOs located on airfields. The FAA is issuing this, so remember, as an advisory, since they do not have a specific relationship with these operations. This belongs to the purview of the airport commissions and the entities that actually own and operate the facilities. So we feel that, you know, they felt some urgency in there. This is why I cannot, I mean, it's just staggering, and 97% loss of revenue. But if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. We're trying to, I think we hopefully plan on maybe next week starting back operating a almost full shift on Sunday so that we have a presence there 7 days a week again instead of just 6. And hopefully we'll be back up and running by the end of the month or next month.
How is the hangar rent coming in on the big hangar? I know you have other aircraft in there expanding, so you're subleasing it out, aren't you?
Well, Executive Aviation is the lion's share of what's in there. I believe we have a CJ and a C-90B, or a C-90B in there, or the 4 aircraft that are in there currently. So the relief we're asking for kind of indirectly helps Executive, who's been, our numbers are probably that bad or even worse. I mean, you know, we used to account for close to 25% of the fuel sales at the airport, and I mean, it's just, we're flying 1 or 2 days a week.
But are they paying their rents?
We, as of this month, I mean, the rest of the tenants have been, the other 2, Executive will be able to this month. I cannot speak for next month.
Okay, you're asking for, right now, you're asking just for forgiveness of the 2 months,
We're
right?
asking for 2 months rent abatement for, basically for, what would it be, April and May.
Rather than a deferment.
Yes, sir. I mean, you know, the truth is, this is not going to come back. It's, you know, this is just lost revenue. Those who own rental properties, those who own restaurants, I mean, it's not coming back. You're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way, earn it every day at a time.
I want to say I was wrong about one thing. Last meeting, that I assumed that we already had this deferment in place, because if, as on our other hangars, if payments are missed, we have a procedure to assess 10% and whatever assessment it is, damages until it's paid. And I think the only requirement on the FBOs, if they miss, it's a breach contract. Am I right about that? Is that the way you
I believe
understand
that's correct. We just don't want to be in breach or anything else. We've had a great relationship. We prefer to keep it that way, and that's why we're just asking for help.
So what's before us right now is, do we just simply forgive 2 months' rent? Or do we come back and look at the deferment of 2 months, of 3 months? So with that in mind, let's open it up for discussion.
At our previous meeting, there was talk about the payroll protection plan.
Yes, sir.
Have you heard any
We
progress?
we have applied. I believe what we have received is an approval. I cannot speak for certain of that, and hopefully funding will occur. You know how, I can't guarantee it. We're intending to try to have this, if we do get this done, we will make that retroactive to our pay period ended last Saturday, I believe. So we will, if we can get this anytime between now and the next pay period, we will make it retroactive, and all of our employees will be receiving full pay.
So part of that is that you had 2.5 months of, based off your average of 2019 payroll, you got 2.5 months of your average monthly from 2019
Correct.
given to you, with the intent of covering employees for 8 weeks.
Correct.
With the remaining amount of the money, because obviously 2.5 months is more than 8 weeks, was for utilities and for rent and those pieces. That's the way it was designed.
I don't, I did not fill out the application incomplete. I know our intent is to fully pay all of our employees. Trying to, they're hurting as bad as we are. And so this is, for us, we treat this as a transfer of funds from the government to them. It's not our money to keep.
Well, that's something I would maybe try to include in that, because I've applied for the program. I'm real familiar with the program. Is that it's intended to be able to cover rent, utilities, any interest on mortgages, or those are and then the payroll, of course. You're required to spend 75% of the money on
Correct.
payroll, but the other 25% after those 8 weeks is intended to be able to help. That's why they did 2.5 weeks of loan for eight weeks of employee coverage, was so that you had a little extra in there rather than calculating all of it.
I apologize. I took it that the intent was for us to cover the employees 2.5 weeks too. I mean, or 2.5 months, excuse me.
You have to spend it within the 8, or it's not deferred, or it's not forgiven. You have to spend it within 8 weeks of when your loan closes, or else the money is not, it's not.
It's not-
You
not
have to
grant-
basically
not
borrow it
granted.
at 1%. So
Okay.
the banks are required to check all that after the fact. So
Right.
part of that plan is, and I mean, you go back and do your numbers and see, but if you have a 2.5 months, so let's say it's, say 12 weeks there, maybe, let's go 10 weeks. So you have 10 weeks basically of payroll from your average from 2019 to you. And then
Okay.
that gives you 8 weeks of payroll for 2020, and then the other 2 weeks of kind of extra for utilities and for rent. So that's where I'd like to see as part of this, is if you do get approved for that, and obviously we hope you do, this make it really easy for your employees, and it fills the requirement of what that plan was put up for, that
Okay.
if you get approved for that, then we come back on the board as possibly able to get rent again, because the money's there for the rent.
If that is the case, but obviously, when we made the request, it wasn't, the forms weren't even completely in. We have now applied for it. Whether we get funded or not, I hope, but
So have you gotten the approval from the SBA? Have you gotten an approval?
we haven't received an email that our application has been submitted.
Okay.
And that's kind of the extent. I think it has, who knows? I don't know, Mike. I wish I could tell you. I will make a commitment to you that if we are approved and we are funded fully like that, then we will gladly waive the abatement, forbearance, what do you want to call it, and be glad to pay the $4,700. I mean, the intent here is to get through, not to try to rake a little extra cash. We'll be glad to open that up and let you come in and look. But if we are approved and we do have those funds to do that, then we will do that.
Anyone else?
Although I want to caution you, that I may be back in June if it doesn't start picking up a little bit again too. But yes, absolutely. There's no reason the city should have to bear any of that brunt either.
Well, keep in mind, whatever we do here today, probably we will be getting many requests from other renters. And so that's,
Well, in all fairness, the FAA has issued their guidelines recommending this basically for the 121, 135, 145, the repair stations, and the FBOs. I did not read anywhere in there that corporate hangars or individual hangars where they were recommending it. That's a commission decision. It's a commission decision even on us, so but that was their guidance.
Anyone else?
Hey, Neil, this is Joel Gardner. Can I weigh in for a moment?
Yes, that's what we're asking for, Joel. Yes, please.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't overstep anybody else. It sounds to me like we're making this a whole heck of a lot more difficult than it is. From my understanding, Dave, you guys are just looking to have it deferred for 2 months, whether it's March and April or April and May. I'm not sure which 2 months it's going to be. But even if it was April and May, then you take the April and May rents and you split that out over the remaining 7 months of the year. Is that correct?
No, what I sent to the group after the last meeting, to be very specific, were 2 requests. The first request is that the $4,700 rent is forgiven for 2 months, and if that request fails, we're requesting 3 months of deference, which we would pay back before the end of the year. That's what I said.
I like option B. I like option B. Dave, I think you guys will be good for it. And I'm just going to say I like option B. And I'm ready to throw that out on the floor so that we can get moving on to the next item if you guys want to make a decision now.
Well, Joel, but what's out there is not a two-month deferral. They're asking for a 3-month deferral.
Right. Right,
So, Joel,
right. That's why I say option B.
Joel, are you making a
But I just wanted to make that clear, because I thought you said 2-month deferral. And it's all the same. I mean, it's a deferral.
Yes.
Joel, is that a motion?
I'm fishing, trying to find out what the commission is.
Unless there's further discussion, I'll make a motion that we select the option B, which is the 3-month deferral with a payback prior to the close of 2020.
By the end of 2020?
Yeah, that was our request number 2.
I'll second.
It's okay. We got a motion second that we go with.
Andrew?
Yes.
3-month deferral, as I understand it, to be paid back by the end of the year. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, sir. That was the motion.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear. Roll call.
Collier? Collier?
Greg, you're on mute.
On mute.
Greg, you're on mute.
Yes.
Okay. Barker?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Schoonover?
Yes.
Thomason?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes?
All approved.
Chairman, Commissioners, appreciate y'all working with us. We really do.
And I just want to say, I'm sorry we didn't get this done last week. We should have done this last week, guys.
You want discussion on that, Joel? Are you throwing that out there for discussion?
No, there's no further discussion on my end.
Okay. Okay. Then it'll speak for itself. Next item on the agenda, we already covered Ernest issue. Bill, do you update on the hangar airport operation report?
Yes, we are currently full at this time, and we got about 50 on the list, waiting for a hangar.
Okay, and I think we're going to see, Adam's going to present some, we asked him to come up with some ideas on some hangars. He'll have that for us. Activity report, Wyman. This is awkward. This is awkward. Very awkward.
We're about $48,000 ahead. I would like to ask Bill, I know the grass is starting to grow on the airport, and I think the porters are still on lockdown, aren't they? Have you got enough manpower to take care of it in the interim?
Well, right now, there's a lot of wet areas, so we can't mow everything. So we are keeping up with what we can get done. I know Summit is helping out cleaning up the terminal as much as they can, and we stop in there every day and check and make sure the restrooms are full as far as the necessary things, and we are mopping and sweeping. So it's hard, but we're keeping up with it.
I think you've already had a pretty good report from the FBO. The operations are down
Yes,
considerably.
I understand that. Some of the numbers look like they're up, like fuel sales and stuff, but as we were talking a while ago, those are calculated differently than just what goes in the aircraft through the months. So that's never been a real easy calculation to follow. Operations seems to be okay. So I don't know what's attributed to that. Is a lot of students flying, or at least we got the operation there. A lot of people, it'd be a good time to learn to fly while you're off work, I guess. Yep, I'm sure they are, and going out for pleasure flying. Anyone else want to talk about the operations and activities? If not, we'll ask Adam to talk about our hangar sites in the east side taxiway.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to share my screen, but I may not be able to do that. But I think Rose sent out a couple exhibits. I made a few slight tweaks to them, but they should be pretty much the same thing that's on my screen. You should also be seeing in the exhibits that Rose sent out. Before we get into those exhibits, though, I want to talk a little bit about what was in the CARES package for airports. It does have an effect on you. A lot of things bounced around in that package while they were negotiating it, but where things settled out on that, basically two big advantages for you on that package. Number one, all FAA grants this year will be 100% funded by the FAA. Obviously, that's different than past years where that is 90% FAA funds, and then we go get 10% reimbursement from the state. And so that being 100% funding doesn't really necessarily change your financial interest in your project this year with the FAA, which is the design of the East Taxiway. But the fact that the state is not matching 10% of your grants or 10% of any grants in 2020 does hopefully put more money back into their grant funding, and hopefully will then provide more 80-20 and 90-10 state-only grant projects that we could use for things like hangars. And so we're estimating that could be somewhere between $2 and $3 million of money that the state would typically use to match FAA grants that instead would go just to standalone state projects. So that's important for you. That's just going to be for 2020, at least for now. We'll see if anything else changes. The other thing that was in that CARES package was $100 million for GA airports. There's not a whole lot of guidance on that right now, what that looks like. All we know is it's going to be split up by the classification of airport. You're classified as a regional airport, which is the second highest classification for GA airports. And so right now we're projecting that could be somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 of funds that would be available to you through that CARES package. But they really haven't published any guidance on how to get that money, how they're going to distribute that money, if it's for projects, or is it to cover lost revenue, like fuel flowage fees maybe not being as high as they typically would be. We just don't know yet. I'll be keeping Lyman, James, and Bill in the loop as we hear about that guidance. The last conversation I had with FAA, which was this week, was that hopefully next week we'll have some more information on it. But it is going to be a fairly substantial amount, I think, and it's not necessarily have to be used for project costs. It could be used for just general revenue coverage for losses. But we'll have to figure out if it has to be proven losses or just going to give you a lump sum payment and assume that you incur loss. I'm not sure how it's going to look just yet, and I will keep you posted on that front.
Thanks.
We are
questions
hearing.
or comment for Adam?
Yes, go ahead.
Anyone have any questions or comment for Adam? If not, any old business?
Well, Neil, do you want me to go ahead and run through that hangar stuff now too?
Pardon me? Oh, yes, please do.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I just want to get that
I'm
up front.
telling you, I'm having a
CARES
hard
Act
time
done first.
understanding you. It's a little garbled in what we're hearing here in the audio. But yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
So, what I wanted to say is, at the end of the last meeting, the commission asked that I put together a couple possible hangar configurations that could utilize state funding. And so what I did was I put together 2 exhibits along with cost estimates that looked at a possible hangar site on the east side of the airfield on 265 and also on the west side of the airfield adjacent to the perimeter road. With both these projects, I've assumed that you may be able to get up to $500,000 of state funding, which would be using 2 grants for that. However, at least the way they're drawn right now, using just big picture budget numbers, both of those projects would also require, about that same amount or 400,000 or so of local match. Again, using conservative numbers. And just assuming that the hangars that we construct would be similar to what we just built off Powell Street back in 2013. Those square 48 by 40, roughly, hangar bays that could fit a twin engine. And so a couple things to note. I'm going to first start talking about the East Hangar development site. We did have a conversation with FAA. And we feel comfortable that we can bring those hangars closer to the taxiway like they're shown in that exhibit. If you can remember previous exhibits, we expected that we'd have to push those hangars a lot further away from the runway, but we've been getting approvals from FAA recently to bring those in a little bit closer as long as they have an obstruction light on them, which then allows you to put a lot more development in that area. And so we see that you could get either a 4 or 5 bay clear span hangar between 7,500 and maybe 10,000 square feet of leasable hangar space over there. And the benefit of that is you would also be able to provide, through that same construction of a taxi lane and apron area, the potential where even a private developer could come in and consider some box hangars in that area as well. And so you're really opening up a new development area, and we're just showing one possibility of that. Any questions on that east side layout and what that could look like?
So the 914 would include a 4-bay clear span hangar, and then the new taxiway or the apron expansion to be able to possibly expand again in the future. But it doesn't include the hangars you have shown over here with the 80 by 80s. It's just the 4-bay, right?
That is correct, yes.
Adam, does what you're showing here encroach on this building setback requirement?
Yes, and so right now we're showing a 40-foot setback from the structure to the south, and one of the corrections I made was the north arrow. So on the exhibit, it's the hangar to the right of our proposed clear span hangars. I did not get into the setback off the highway. I think we may be able to actually go further closer to the highway, but I didn't go through the details of the city's manual to see how close we get to the highway. But you may be able to get one more bay in before you run into issues on highway setback.
I'm talking about toward the runway.
So yeah, so towards the runway, right now, technically, you're not supposed to build structures any closer than that facility is just to the south or just to the right on the screen. And that's what I was mentioning is, however, we have been getting approval from FAA to come inside that line. It won't affect your runway operations. You have to put a red light on top of the building. And if you can remember, I believe the commission actually approved another hangar in a similar scenario for George's a couple years ago. We'd have to airspace it through the FAA, but given that this new facility would not be the closest thing to the runway, you can see 2 hangars to the right. That facility still is closer to the runway. They're considering that nowadays, as long as the hangar is what we call shadowed, meaning that it would be in some other hangar's shadow, it would be the closest thing to the runway. It'd be shadowed by something else. They feel pretty comfortable allowing those constructions to take place.
I'd like to remind the commission for 20 years, you've had a requirement that any new buildings on the east side comply with the building setback. During that time, there's been one building burned, and it did move outside the setback and rebuild. The other one moved as far as possible, but has never been built. So I don't know how you feel about having a requirement that you mandate on other people, but then you violate it yourself if you build this building. There's room to reconfigure it and move it outside the setback requirement, just a different arrangement.
But it's the FAA that had that requirement, not the city.
FAA says you can do it, but it violates the requirement that we've put in place and mandated for 20 years.
And you're saying all it would take to move the hangar closer to the runway than that hangar to the south is just simply a red light on top, or was there other conditions?
No, it would simply be a red obstruction light on top of the facility. And like I said, this is not something that, well, I would rephrase that. This is something that's changed very recently. The FAA took a very hard line for many, many years, and I think Wyman's correct and references that y'all's previous guidance was based on that very hard line stance. But as of late, I mean, just the last couple of years, we've seen the FAA start relaxing that requirement, especially at our GA airports where those setbacks are really far away from the runway. And keep in mind, the surface that those setback lines are based off of is a planning surface. It is not a surface that actually directly impacts your runway. It is just a planning surface, which is why they are allowing construction to encroach on that. There's another line much closer to the taxiway that if you penetrated, it would affect your approaches, but we are well outside of that line in this configuration.
Well, since you did what we asked you in the last meeting or to do, what's your recommendation that you need from us in order to move this forward in whatever fashion we decide in the future, whatever configuration might add? I know we all lean toward that east side first. Are we looking at doing it all in conjunction or just pick and choose either the east or the west side?
Yeah, so I think that's what I'd be asking for y'all is one, is there a side you prefer, east or west? Because that way we can start doing a little bit more detailed analysis. And then the second thing I'd ask for is, do you want to go back to the FAA with the configuration similar to this on the east side that's inside that building restriction line and push that process further, which would obviously probably have to include changing some of your own guidance to instead of talk about the building restriction line being a hard set line, but to be more in line with the thinking of you can't build any closer than the closest structure around you.
Is it your feeling that it would be a good idea to table this discussion until we understand a little more about what's going on in our, not only immediate area, but in the nation with the problem we're faced with? Would we be wise to put this discussion on hold for a future date?
I don't see any reason you have to rush this right now. But as I mentioned at the beginning of my conversation, I do expect the state's going to have more funds to give for grants, but my guess is that funding is probably not going to materialize for the next 6 to 8 months probably. And so you have a little bit of time to think about what you want to do. Because obviously you can do a similar configuration that's just further away from the runway, obviously just increase the cost. You lose developable space as you squeeze it down between the highway and the building restriction line, and it costs more to get out to it. And so I think you have some time to think about that, because it is a long-term decision for you on how you want to handle the east side without sacrificing your grant fund potential.
I'd like to see us move forward and be prepared so that when those funds became available, we're first in line to get some of those funds, but have everything set and ready to go so that there's no delays.
You're talking about primarily the east side, right, Steve?
Yes, I'm strictly talking about the east side right now, yes.
Anybody else?
Would there be any cost benefit to do both of them at the same time from a materials and that aspect of it?
You know, maybe a little bit. I don't think it's going to be a whole lot of benefit. The sites are far enough apart where you may get a little bit of a benefit if you had the same building manufacturer for both. Both may give you a bit of a discount, but from a contractor standpoint, I don't see a whole lot of construction savings on it.
We've got 50 pilots on the waiting list right now for hangar space.
Right.
Turn on this. Are these numbers with sewer and water? I'm just trying to figure out what these would rent for, what our return on this would be.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike, and I did not do any ROI calculations. This does include sewer and water extension. It's actually much cheaper on the 265 side than the west side because you have sewer and water already at the highway. So those costs actually go down on this site. But I have not done any ROI calcs to see, based on the rent that you get for those facilities, how fast you could pay back that $414,000 city investment.
I know you talked about the total cost on the east side, but could you give that to us again?
Yeah, so right now, total cost all in, big picture is $914,000 for the east side.
Okay. So we're looking at $1 million project.
You might want to consider what you want to leave for leasing for commercial hangars. The site on the west side does not have access to water and sewer, which is normal for T hangars. But the site on 71B on the east side would have access to water and sewer, so it would be more pleasing to someone that wants to build a large corporate hangar.
Yeah, I think that's just another reason for preferring the east side. It is the utilities, easier access, and it's already there. What do you need from us today, Adam?
I think we can all agree we want to do the east side over the west side. If we're only able to do one project, that's the direction we'd all want to go. So if we need to do further breaking that down, get a return on investment on it, whatever else you have to flesh out in the project so that, like Steve said, we want to be first in line. Other groups aren't meeting right now, so we could actually have everything together with a packet ready to rock when the world goes back to normal operation, and that put us first in line.
Yeah, because I think the government's going to come with a lot of grant money and a lot of funds to get this economy cranking back up, and we might as well be in a position where we can take advantage of that real quick.
Agreed.
Agreed.
What do you need from us, Adam?
So all I need is that direction formalized, and what I will come back to you with is a contract to start getting this thing going next month.
Then I'll
make
make
a
a
motion.
motion. I'll second it.
Go ahead.
Okay, who made the motion?
Steve.
Steve made the motion.
To,
Mike in second.
what is the motion exactly?
Motion is that we give Adam the authority to proceed.
Start a contract.
To look at the east side project.
And do up a contract, I think. Wasn't that, Adam?
Yes, sir, that's correct. To develop a contract to bring back to you for approval.
Did you get that? Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Barker,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Schoonover,
Yes.
Thomason,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Collier,
Yes.
approved.
What I was about to say before I jumped the gun a while ago there, I want you to know this is very awkward for me, sitting in this position, but all in all, it's working great. Appreciate everyone participating in it. And we'll see if we can't go back to our regular meetings and everything, hopefully next month. It may be a couple months before that happens, but it looks to me like, listening to the news and everything, seems to be like there's a softening as to the fact that we want to get back as early as possible. So hopefully that's going to happen. Any other comments from the commissioners?
Adam, I just wanted to ask, make sure I understand. As it's currently set up with what grants we see that are out there right now, the city of Springdale would be obligated to the $414,320, but we're planning this for grants to come and money to come, so we're not actually asking the city to come up with that kind of money. That's not really our plan. It's to kind of hold things, right?
Yeah, so that's just the best guess right now. The where we go from here is we'd actually design this thing, get y'all's input on the design of it, put it out for bid. Once we get hard bid numbers, then we'd be able to go to the city and get that money when we apply for those grants at that time.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Neil, do we need to anticipate individual hangar renters coming to us with their immediate concerns about their ability to pay? How we're going to approach that?
I'm afraid, I don't know if that's the right word, but it appears to me that if there is others out there, this may spark a more desire to come to us and ask for that. We called a special meeting for this purpose for the FBO. Now, I don't know if we should extend that to the other hangars or not, or if we just would put any request on the agenda for the next meeting. I guess we can deal with that as we go down the road. I will say this, however, that I expressed concern about my business, which is has many rentals, and I've not noticed that big of a fall off. I've been pleasantly surprised about how willing people are to pay the rents. Of course, this is residential, it's not commercial per se, but, I'm looking at it a little different, have a little more optimistic than I was in the past, but, we do know the aviation industry has been hit hard. I will say this, I really think, Mark and I was talking to Mark as we was walking in the door, and just what I've been hearing today, airline industry flying with 4% capacity on planes. And I don't know that fear of passenger flying aircraft will go away anytime soon. So it may be, we may get a spark on general aviation, because people are still going to travel, and some of them may elect to travel private plane rather than the commercial airlines. At this point, we'll just have to see. That's just an idea I had, thought we might look at, and it might be something that will manifest itself, hopefully.
Bill, for what it's worth, my thoughts are there's a very big difference between a business coming for relief, trying to pay employees, versus somebody that has a hangar rented from us for their private airplane. I don't see it as the same kind of issue. So I think Summit's a special case from that standpoint. And I think if we have individuals that come to us wanting relief from hangar rent, it's different than a business that's trying to maintain employees and payroll.
Their leases are a lot different also.
And like
I'm sorry, I didn't hear Wyman's comment.
Their lease agreements are a lot different when it comes to late payment and penalty. There's a lot of difference in their leases.
Yes, that's what we alluded to on the front end of this, that I had interpreted our contract with Summit as being equal to the hangar rents, but there's a percentage for late fees in the regular hangars, and where there's not for the FBO. It's a little more dire if they should miss their rent payments. So if you have a hangar out there and you're a couple months late, we have tools to deal with that. And we might look at it down the road of forgiving some of that even, or something, which wouldn't be nearly the hit that it would be otherwise.
Yes. Okay.
But as far as calling a special meeting, I wouldn't see it necessary. They can make the request during our next meeting or something. Anyone else? If not, we'll adjourn. Thank you, guys.